We continue Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough, by starting with Caius Marius. We are altogether ignorant of any third name of Caius Marius, as also of Quintus Sertorius, that possessed himself of Spain, or of Lucius Mummius, that destroyed Corinth, though this last was surnamed Achaicus from his conquests, as Scipio was called Africanus and Metellus. Macedonicus, hence Posidonius, draws his chief argument to confute those that hold the third to be the Roman proper name, as Camillus, Marcellus, Cato, as in this case those that had but two names would have no proper name at all. He did not, however, observe that by his own reasoning he must rob the women absolutely of their names, for none of them have the first, which Posidonius imagines the proper name with the Romans. Of the other two, one was common to the whole family, Pompei, Manlii, Cornelii, as with the Greeks, and Heraclida, and Pelepida. The other, titular and personal, either take from their natures or actions, or bodily characteristics, as Macrinus, Torquatus, Sulla, such as are Mnemon, Gruppus, or Callinicus among the Greeks. On the subject of names, however, this irregularity of custom, would we insist upon it, might furnish us with discourse enough. There is a likeness of Marius in stone at Ravenna, in Gaul, which I myself saw, quite corresponding with that roughness of character that is ascribed to him, being naturally valiant and warlike, and more acquainted also with the discipline of the camp than of the city. He could not moderate his passion when in authority. He is said never to have either studied Greek or to have use of that language in any manner of consequence, thinking it ridiculous to bestow time in that learning, the teachers of which were little better than slaves. So, after his second triumph, when, at the dedication of a temple, he presented some shows, after the Greek fashion, coming into the theatre, he only sat down and immediately departed, and accordingly, as Plato used to say to Xenocrates, the philosopher, who was thought to show more than ordinary harshness of disposition, I pray you, good Xenocrates, sacrifice to the Graces. So if any could have persuaded Marius to pay his devotions to the Greek muses and Graces, he had never brought his incomparable actions, both in war and peace, so unworthy to a conclusion, or wrecked himself, so to say, upon an old age of cruelty and vindictiveness, through passion, ill-timed ambition, and insatiable cupidity. But this will further appear by and by from the facts. He was born of parents altogether obscure and indigent, who supported themselves by their daily labor. His father of the same name with himself, his mother called Fulcinia. He had spent a considerable part of his life before he saw and tasted the pleasures of the city, having passed previously in Kirhaton, a village of the territory of Arpinum, a life, compared with city delicacies, rude and unrefined, yet temperate. yet temperate, and conformable to the ancient Roman severity. He first served as a soldier in the war against the Celtiberians, when Scipio Africanus besieged Numantia, where he signalized himself to his general by courage far above his comrades, and particularly by his cheerful employing with Scipio's reformation of his army. Being almost ruined by pleasures and luxury, it is stated too that he encountered and vanquished an enemy in single combat in his general's sight. In consequence of all this, he had several honors conferred upon him, and once, when at an entertainment in question arose about commanders, and one of the company, whether really desirous to know, or only in consequence ex Scipio, were the Romans after him should obtain another general, Scipio, gently clapping Marius on the shoulder as he sat next to him, replied, "Here, perhaps." So promising was his early youth of his future greatness, and so discerning was Scipio to detect the distinct future in the present first beginnings. It was this speech of Scipio, we are told, which, like a divine admonition, chiefly emboldened Marius to aspire to a political career. He sought, and by the assistance of Caecilius Metellus, of whose family he, as well as his father, were dependents, obtained the office of tribune of the people, in which place, when he brought forward a bill for the regulation of voting, which seemed likely to lessen the authority of the great men in the courts of justice, the consul Cotta opposed him and persuaded the Senate to declare against the law, and called Marius to account for it. He, however, when this decree was prepared, coming into the Senate, did not behave like a young man newly and undeservedly advanced to authority, but assuming all the courage that his future actions would have warranted, threatened Cotta, unless he recalled the decree, to throw him into prison, and on his turning to Metellus and asking his vote, and Metellus rising up to concur with the consul, Marius, calling for the officer outside, commanded him to take Metellus into custody. He appealed to the other tribunes, but not one of them assisted him, so that the Senate, immediately complying, withdrew the decree. Marius came forth with glory to the people, and confirmed his law, and was henceforth esteemed a man of undaunted courage and assurance, as well as a vigorous opposer of the Senate in favor of the commons. But he immediately lost their opinion of him by a contrary action, for when a law for the distribution of corn was proposed, he vigorously and successfully resisted it, making himself equally honored by both parties and gratifying neither, contrary to the public interest. After his tribuneship, he was candidate for the office of chief aedile, there being two orders of them, one of the curules from the stool with crooked feet, which they sat when they performed their duty, the other an inferior called aediles of the people. And as soon as they had chosen the former, they gave their voices again for the latter. Marius, finding he was likely to be put by for the greater, immediately changed and stood for the less. But because he seemed too forward and hot, he was disappointed of that also, and yet though he was in one day twice frustrated of his desired preferment, which never happened any before, yet he was not at all discouraged, but a little while after sought for the praetorship, and was nearly suffering a repulse, and then too, though he was returned last of all, was nevertheless accused of bribery. Cassius Sabacco's servant, who was observed within the rails among those who voted, chiefly occasioned his suspicion, as Sabacco was an intimate friend of Marius, but on being called to appear before the judges, he alleged that being thirsty by reason of the heat, he called for cold water, and that his servant brought him a cup, and as soon as he had drunk departed. He was, however, excluded from the Senate by the succeeding censors, and did not undeservedly either, as was thought, whether it might be for his false evidence, or his want of temperance. Caius Marius was also cited to appear as evidence, but pleaded that it was not customary for a patron, the Roman word for protector, to witness against his clients, and that the law excused them from that harsh duty, and both Marius and his parents had always been clients to the family of Herenii, and when the judges would have accepted of this plea, Marius himself opposed it, and told Herennius that when he was first created magistrate, he ceased to be his client, which was altogether true, for it is not every office that frees clients and their posterity from the observance due to their patrons, but only those to which the law has assigned a curule chair. Notwithstanding, though the beginning of the suit, it went somewhat hard with Marius, and he found the judges no way favorable to him, yet at last, their voices being equal, contrary to all expectation, he was acquitted. In his praetorship he did not get much honor, yet after it had obtained the further Spain, which province he is said to have had cleared of robbers, with which it was much infested, the old barbarous habits still prevailing, and the Spaniards in those days still regarding robbery as a piece of valor, or at least the Greeks and Romans thought so, right? It's hard to tell with claims like that sometimes what the truth was. In the city, he had neither riches nor eloquence to trust to, with which the leading men of the time obtained power with the people, but his vehement disposition, his indefatigable labors, and his plain way of living of themselves gained him esteem and influence, so that he made an honorable match with Julia, of the distinguished family of the Khazars, to whom that Khazar was nephew, who was afterwards so great among the Romans, and in some degree from his relationship made Marius his example, as in his life we have observed. Marius was praised for both temperance and endurance, of which latter he gave a decided instance in an operation of surgery, for having, as it seems, both his legs full of great tumors, and disliking the deformity, he determined to put himself into the hands of an operator, when, without being tied, he stretched out one of his legs, and silently, without changing countenance, endured most excessive torments in the cutting, never either flinching or complaining. But when the surgeon went to the other, he declined to have it done, saying, "I see the cure is not worth the pain." The consul Caius Metellus, being declared general in the war against Jugurtha in Africa, took with him Marius for lieutenant, were eager himself to do great deeds and services that would get him distinction. Better to do it for yourself than rather your name, but he did not, like others, consult Metellus' glory and the serving his interest, which, attributing his honor of lieutenancy not to Metellus, but to fortune, which had presented him with a proper opportunity and theatre of great actions, he exerted his utmost courage. That war too affording several difficulties, he neither declined the greatest nor disdained undertaking the least of them, but surpassing his equals in counsel and conduct, and matching the very common soldiers in labor and abstemiousness, he gained great popularity with them, as indeed any voluntary partaking with people in their labor is felt as an easing of that labor, as it seems to take away the constraint and necessity of it. It is the most obliging sight in the world to the Roman soldier to see a commander eat the same bread as himself, or lie upon an ordinary bed, or assist the work in the drawing a trench and raising a bulwark, for they do not so much admire those that confer honors and riches upon them as those that partake of the same labors and dangers with themselves, but love them better that will vouchsafe to join in their work than those that encourage their idleness. Now, certainly we should see that, presidents and all those other ones, if they're not willing to do the fight themselves, if they're not throwing their own kids into the midst of the battle and all that stuff, they need to stop. Because, if there's not real self-defense going on, not real defense of the innocent, and just, war games between leaders, it's no.